You're listening to the Red Man Podcast.
Guys, welcome to our first installment of the Red Man interview series. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Ken Davis, board certified entomologist. You ought to feel special, Ken. Also here with us, we have Tripp Brewer, Ace, Chris Mosley, Ace, and myself, Kolby Crine.
Yeah, he says you ought to feel special because Ken is literally our only board certified entomologist on staff. That's correct, right?
I want to say only one of a couple in the state.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And you've been that as long as I've known you, Ken. I've known you a long time. Before we get into this interview, you already mentioned some of it, Kolby. You're a board certified entomologist. One of the things I thought was really cool, because I think this happened before I joined the Red family, was you became a Mississippi Hall of Fame award winner with the Mississippi Pest Control Association in 2022. That's a big deal, man.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you got that?
I was very surprised, number one.
Yeah.
And really touched. Touched me emotionally very, very much.
I remember when they gave you that award and it was shared on Red's Facebook page, all the comments, and it was sort of like a who's who of all the people that have known you over the years that were congratulating you. That was a big deal. I was proud of you for that. Yeah, it was. There's a lot of folks.
Did you get
I was one of them.
Did you get like a bust of your face that they put in the museum somewhere?
Somewhere.
But literally for over 40 years you've been in this industry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but over 40 years you've been doing this, and you have 45 this year. Wow. You have mentored and taught so many people over the years, and I don't even know you can qualify a number on it. There's been so many people, because when you were with Terminex for years, you ran their Aspire program, which is where you taught people entomology, and you did that for many years.
Yes.
So you've got tons of industry experience. Showed lots of other people the ropes of this industry to get them going. So I'm sure we got a lot to talk about. And I feel like I know you pretty well, but one of the things I'm excited about is I really feel like something today I'm going to learn new about Ken that I didn't know.
That's the goal.
So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Before we get going, we're going to warm you up a little bit, okay? Right. You ready for a warm-up?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to warm you up. So I'm going to ask you some rapid-fire questions. Just the first thing that comes to mind, okay? Yeah. Ken, you a dog person or a cat person?
Dog.
Okay. Favorite genre of music?
Rock.
I'm with you on
Good
that.
choice.
Favorite movie?
That's a tough
That is a tough
That's
one.
tough.
especially on the spot.
I know.
What's what I say?
Godfather.
Godfather. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Favorite sport?
Football.
That's easy.
Favorite food?
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken.
Favorite color?
Blue.
All right. What do you like to do when you're not at work?
Work.
Yeah. I like to watch sports.
Okay.
On TV.
That's a good answer.
Next two questions kind of relate back to all this. What's your favorite insect, Ken?
Do
you have a favorite?
Yeah.
Just a dead one because you're in the pest industry?
Dead one is the best.
This is the one I was most curious to.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, both these next two questions.
I like a sawtooth grain beetle.
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
that is a good one.
All right. What's your least favorite insect?
Bedbug.
Okay. And I'm just going to, this ain't on the card, but I just want to know, Coke or Pepsi, Ken? Which one?
Pepsi.
Pepsi. He's a
Oh,
Pepsi
no.
man.
Dr.
Okay.
Pepper.
Dr. Pepper. Okay.
That's
Dr.
me.
Pepper's a good one. All right. Let's get into serious questions now. So rarely does anyone, I certainly didn't, but rarely does anyone in this industry, when they're a kid, grow up thinking, man, I want to be a bug man when I grow up. I want to be a pest control guy. So I'm just curious, because this is something I don't know. As you were growing up, we all have aspirations to be astronauts and doctors and things like that. Was there anything in particular that you kind of aspired to be that wasn't pest control?
Yes. An oceanographer.
Really?
I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau. If you remember that.
Oh.
Until I saw the movie Jaws. My career path changed.
Jaws completely derailed that, huh? So that was why that's not your favorite movie then.
No.
All right. Well, how exactly, obviously again, it wasn't a set career path. You wanted to be an oceanographer.
Yes.
You saw Jaws, said, no, that's not for me. Was there anything else that got your attention? Because what I'm aiming for here is exactly how did you fall into the pest control industry?
Well, probably like most people, I needed a job.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old. I was selling Tripp.
Yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about this.
I actually got a job in a grocery store
Oh, yeah?
over the phone. And I was living in Greenville, Mississippi, graduated high school. The next day, I packed up everything and moved to Hattiesburg
Really? I didn't realize Hattiesburg was your first stop.
to go to work in the grocery store.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that's a long way to go to work in a grocery store. Did they not have grocery stores in
It
Greenville?
was quote management training program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what lured me. I worked there about 8 months and was starving to death.
Oh, yeah.
Pay was not very good.
Yeah.
So I answered an ad in the paper that Orkin ran.
Okay.
So I became an Orkin man here in Hattiesburg.
Really? I guess I had in my head you were up around Tennessee for some reason around that time.
Nope, November 11th, 1979.
Wow, you remember the day.
Sharp.
No, that was the day of what, your first day with Orkin?
First day with Orkin.
Wow, you remember.
First day in the business industry.
All right, so, again, I'm speaking from my own experience here. You were doing the grocery store thing. You went to Orkin. At that point, did you still think, man, this is my career moving forward? Or do you remember?
About 6 months in.
Really?
About 6 months in.
And what were you doing when you started that? What was your first thing?
My first job with Orkin was annual inspections. Then they moved me to a pest control route. This all was pretty rapid. And they moved me to a salesperson. Did that for a year or so, and then they moved me into a management training program. Oddly enough, when I finished that was 18 weeks in Atlanta, by the way.
Oh, wow.
When I finished my management training program, it just so happened the branch manager position in Hattiesburg was open. So I became the branch manager.
Everything just kind of fell into
Just fell into
place.
place.
That's pretty
So
cool.
I didn't have to move. I was already here.
That's convenient.
Yeah, that's very convenient. But again, so it was basically, and you started out the same way as I did, by the way. You started out, when you said an inspector, you're doing termite inspections.
And I recall that's what you were doing.
And you were probably, you're a really thin guy now. And as long as I've known you've been a thin guy. And I think that's kind of why they threw me into it. There's like, I'm not thin anymore. But back then, I was a really thin guy. And they probably thought, man, this guy can fit under any houses.
You were long and thin.
That's exactly right. Lanky, as I think is a good term for it.
So you had to gain weight to get out of that role, or
No, as long as you're doing termite work, you're going to be thin.
that's true.
At least that was the
in
case
the old
with me.
days,
Especially in the old days. And let's talk about that a little bit, because that's something I was going to ask you. As many years as you've been in this industry, there have been a lot of things that have changed over the years. And you just referenced one of them with termite. I mean, are there things that stand out in your mind, big changes that happened over the years in this industry that you can kind of talk about?
I think two things.
Okay.
On both sides, the pest control side, the general pest side, and the termite side.
Okay.
One with the transition from liquid, because we lost the products that we needed to use to treat homes for termites. The transition from liquid to bait.
And you say we lost the products.
Yes, we had products labeled for termite control that were removed from the market.
Yeah.
You're saying like chlordane and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
chlordane,
Right.
heptachlor, aldrin.
Right.
Terminex, when I was there, we used aldrin instead of the others. So that was a major change, because there was about a 3 to 5 year period where, on the termite side of our business, we really didn't know what we were going to do, because it was like all these new things started to come on the market. New pesticides, new termiticides came on the market, but they were untested.
Right.
This is early 80s, mid 80s?
Early to mid 80s.
Okay.
Terminex went with a product that we found out about 3 or 4 years into it was not good for termite control.
Right.
No.
So they switched again. On the other side, the pest control side, was the transition from using a compressed air sprayer to using a lot more baits, more I wouldn't say safer products, but safety-related products.
Right.
Where,
So focusing kind of on like the early stages of IPM.
yeah,
Right.
for the and not only for the customer but for the applicator.
Right.
Because some of the products we use back, I can tell you this: we use chlordane in the B&G for monthly pest control
Wow.
when I first started.
That's hard to wrap my head around. I had no
Yes.
idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I can remember, and you may not remember this. I can remember when your electric drill went out. We had a mallet and a star drill. We called it a star drill. It was just a rod with star edges on the bottom, and that's what you made your hole in the concrete with. So
Sure, I
talk
do
about
not remember
fun.
that.
No way.
I don't
Never
regret
wanted
not
your
being a
drill
part
to
of
go,
that.
You never wanted your drill to quit working.
Well, thank God that
It was
wasn't
all
a thing when
manual.
I come along.
Manual
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah. Wow. So, and I'm still thinking about bait here, but you hit on pest control. You're right. When IPM came along,
That changed.
one of the
changed all.
hardest things I think at that time was to just get everybody to buy into it.
Yeah.
And it was the same with bait, the way that I remember it.
Yes.
You know, and it's honestly, Ken, it's
Still the
still an
same.
issue.
Yeah.
There's still people in this industry that do not believe in bait. Were you one of those people where it took you a little bit to get sold on it?
It took a little bit to get sold on it. But in that transition, though, was when you got into the baiting, was transition on the pest control side. It went from monthly pest control to quarterly.
Right.
And that was a huge
I remember that.
transition for the technicians.
Well, and for the customers,
Yeah.
they're
For the
used
customer,
to you
they're
coming
used
out
to
every
seeing
single month, and
and
then
you're
you see
trying to
them one
convince them
third.
that the things you use now
Yeah.
Right.
are going to last for 90 days or better. And it was a challenge for.
That's the thing that
Several
stands
years.
out to me. It was a challenge getting our customers to buy into that.
What about the transition? Because this is something I got a little bit of a taste of when I got into the industry, but transition from everything being on paper to being digital.
I remember
How did
that.
you
Oh,
kind
wow.
of comprehend that and observe that take place?
I can remember closeout at Terminex, closing a month out with all paper. And myself and the admin sitting there closing every account out
By hand.
by
Manually.
hand on
That's
paper.
right.
It was like a 3-day process. So yeah, when digital was like, what? Yeah, give me some of that.
Well, I got a little bit of a taste of it in my time at Terminex, when the computer system would be down. That was the backup. Oh, paper tickets today. And I'm like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we got to print off like 1,000 copies of different services and hand them to the guys this morning before they go out. I'm like, and we have how long to do this? And they're like, oh, like 30 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Literally, I mean,
So that was my experience with it. Other than that, I've been digital since I've been in the industry.
in the old days, you would literally, your pest control technician would come in and you would give him a stack about that thick of all of his tickets for the entire month.
Right.
And not only would he, he would have to sort them by city and plan out. I mean, what we're saying is the guys today don't realize how easy they actually have.
The first day of the month was not a work day in the field. It was work day, organize your route
Routes.
for the month.
That's right.
Because nothing was scheduled, nothing was
Pre-planned.
pre-planned. It was just here's your
Have fun.
customer.
Yeah, I want to thank the old guys because I grew up in it. I'm the youngest out of y'all, but I was in the office when I was like 5.
Yeah.
So I remember the ladies back in the day. And all the paper and all the. We had these big old filing cabinets, and now that's where your desk is. All those filing cabinets are gone, and y'all paved the way. I don't have to deal with all that paper stuff.
we had filing cabinets galore, all over the place because everything was in paper.
It's pretty interesting to see your perspective on certain things versus mine, just because of my age versus it's pretty interesting.
It's amazing to me, probably more so because I have seen all those steps go through.
You've lived it.
And to look back on it now, at the end of my career, look back on it and say, gosh, how do we come so far?
Right.
But, we still face challenges today with technology. And it's not all just, it's great and wonderful now.
Trust me, I know that.
And speaking of technology, this may be getting a little bit off track, but the biggest one I wanted to ask you about was cell phones. Like, how in the world did pest control operate without? I feel like that's all we do.
Ken,
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Tell them, Ken, they're going to love this.
Isn't it?
At first, we had two-way radios.
Like CBs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And every truck had, and we had the base station at the branch.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, the admin would call you, call them back. That was the only way of communicating. And when you got out of range, you're just out of range. But I'll tell you a quick story about that. We used to, when we'd get to a commercial account that had a really bad rat infestation, in those days we would use Gas in the burrows. So when you put the gas in, the rats they would jump like 3 foot high. So we would call each other on the radio. I got it, so and so store. I'm gonna be there at 1 o'clock. Come on, because everybody loved to see that process and the rats jumping out everywhere.
Wow.
I also remember there were certain times during the day where, at least in my experience, I was required to find these guys. They won't hardly know what I'm talking about. A payphone. We had a 1-800 number, and we were to call in and check into the office at least twice a day. Just not only would you check in with the radio, but you would also find a payphone, call that 1-800 number, and just check in.
And even as bad, if not worse, was the map book.
Yes.
Like
no GPS.
Yeah, no,
I can't imagine that. Even today
Google.
with GPS, you get lost, like wrong address, down an old dirt road.
You literally had map books for the larger cities on your route. So if you got in Hattiesburg and you wanted to find certain streets, you had to go to the map book and look it up. It was
and not just the cities. I mean, all the rural areas. My glove box would be full of maps. Yeah. And I'll tell you what was good about that. We've become so reliant on GPS now. I mean, back then when we used that map, and you would remember that stuff easier. You would learn these roads quicker. And it got to a point where it wouldn't be that often you'd have to reference the map. Yeah. But we're so reliant on technology, not only for the running these pest routes, but even finding all these houses and servicing. I mean, you're right; it's wonderful when it works. Yeah. But when it don't work, it makes you kind of long for those old days, doesn't it?
Well, nobody's prepared to how to deal with that.
Right.
They're used to the comforts of each and every day.
Or at least, hey, the computer's down will give me some option, but there's really no option. You're just down.
You're just down.
Yeah, there's certain parts of Mississippi. You get out there and the GPS starts, I'm like loading, all of a sudden it stops loading. I'm just like, well,
what do I do now?
Kind of getting nervous.
What am I doing now?
I can even remember stopping at the post office occasionally and asking the lady in the post office, "Hey, you know where this road is? I can't. It's not on my map." and if they couldn't tell you, maybe you stop at a convenience store or something. Maybe somebody would know. But I can remember that.
Oh yeah.
So while we're talking about the early days of pest control, well, specifically your early days in pest control, did you ever have like what I would call a welcome to pest control moment? Like, was there a particular house or a problem that you ran into where you were like, wow, I didn't even know stuff like this happened? Anything like that stand out?
I can recall one rental property actually here in Hattiesburg that I was sent to. House had been vacant for several months, so you can imagine. And it was not in a good neighborhood, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. House had trash still left from months earlier. Mm-hmm. And when I went to open the door, I could see antenna sticking out around the door.
Right.
So you know what it looked like on the inside. It was a nightmare. I mean, it was a German roach nightmare. Thousands and thousands and thousands.
Right.
Wow. Did you call your manager and go, I don't know about this?
I need backup.
I couldn't call him.
Yeah, didn't have a phone.
Oh, that's true. You had to get on your CB and go,
get on my two and say, you might want to ride over here and take a look at this.
Right. Just FaceTime him. Look at all this.
And all, dude, you got it.
That's crazy.
It was. That's the worst, and that was the worst case I've ever seen in all these years.
It's funny that it's German roaches because that was going to be mine. I mean, that was mine. I mean, because if you've never been around that or you've never experienced that, the first time you go in a house that is wrapped up with them like what you're talking about, it's sort of a shock.
It is a shock.
It is, and then you really do see the importance of your job at that point. What a big deal pest control is.
Absolutely.
So that's good.
Because no human being could live in a home like
No.
Well, and I'll tell you, there's no greater satisfaction than being able to help somebody that's in that situation.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're able to finally get rid of that level of a problem that somebody has and you get it all taken care of and they look at you and they're just, most of the time they're in tears because they're like, I can't believe I finally have gotten through this. And normally you're the main reason that it happened, and gives a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah,
for me, in this industry.
I tell people all the time. I think the best part about our industry is the fact people aren't upset to see us. They're excited because we're coming to help
Solve
them.
problems.
Because nobody wants to live with bugs, German roaches or bed bugs. It's a nightmare.
Right.
I mean, it really is. It can be a nightmare.
It is.
So we're able to bring some peace with no pests, as we say.
That's it.
So you started out at Orkin, and how long were you at Orkin?
6 years.
6 years at Orkin. So tell me, how did you make the jump? Because I think I know what was next. You went from Orkin, you went from red to green. I'm speaking colors now, not Red Pest Solutions. You went from Orkin red to Terminex green. Is that right? How did that happen?
There was a older gentleman at Terminex. This was a franchise out of Mobile. Fred Strickland Sr. You may have met
Yes,
him.
I remember him.
He and I bumped into each other occasionally at some association meetings or something, and he would talk to me, and he said, you come talk to me one day. Come talk to me one day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he actually came and talked to me one day, and he said, and I was in that I need to make a change mood day.
He caught you at the right time.
You were all antsy on that occasion.
And to impress me even more, he flew in on a company plane to see me.
Oh, yeah.
Which was like Mobile to Hattiesburg, 10 minutes. So, but anyway, he was a great guy. Like a second father to me. But he said, I don't know what I can pay you. I don't know what you're going to do. But if you'll trust me, I'll take care of you. And I said, well, Fred, trust right now is not really in my vocabulary. but I, for some reason, he was this kind of type man you could trust, I felt. And I said, okay. So I worked my notice out at Orkin and went to work in Mobile. They just kind of had me traveling around, but ended up spending 30 years.
Wow.
With
It's a
Terminex.
long time.
Through the transition of the acquisition by Terminex International. And then...
and you had a lot of different roles when you were at Terminex.
I did.
So where did you start when you were at Terminex? Where you were a branch
They
manager?
put me in as branch manager in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Okay.
They had just bought that franchise. So I worked in Baton Rouge for a couple of years. Then they moved me to Jackson as regional manager.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Worked in that position for several years. Then they split that region, and there was no place for me to go. So it was like, what do we do with him?
Right.
So they created this training position that I actually traveled around through Louisiana and Mississippi for about 12 years, doing the training schools you mentioned,
Right.
special schools, and like I said, that's how I ended my career with them. I just wanted to get off the road. Didn't really want to work in a branch anymore.
Right.
So I said, well, I'm 58 years old.
Right.
I'm just going to retire. So I did. And there's a backstory to that. My dad, who I cherished, worked in a bank till he's age 62, right at retirement age, got cancer and died. Never got to enjoy a day of retirement. Matter of fact, his last couple of years were just treatments and all that.
Right.
My stepdad worked for Frito-Lay for 35 years, retired at age 62, and died before he was 63
Oh, my goodness.
of cancer. So that implanted in my mind, I'm not going to have that happen to me.
Right.
So I retired early, I thought. 58, good. I got some years left.
Yeah.
And that was the end of my career with Terminator.
I remember that. I remember thinking, man, I was kind of surprised when I heard that. I was happy for you, but I was surprised because I thought, man, Ken's got a lot of good years ahead of him in the pest control industry. But you hung it up. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say at one point you sort of came back doing newsletters or something for Terminator.
Yeah, they contacted me after about 3 months or so. They asked me to do some newsletters for the Memphis corporate. And I started doing all sorts of insect letters,
Right.
Newsletters, then it was like every week they wanted me to do, can you do one on this? Can you do one on this? And it just kept going for weeks and weeks and weeks.
They said you thought you were going to get to retire.
Yeah, and
We're going to keep you busy.
I did some stuff for Orkin at their training meeting. Just
See, I didn't know that.
yeah, and I did some stuff for a couple of other companies that would just call up and say, "Hey, can you?"
Right.
But I never got paid for those. I wouldn't accept any money for those. That was just
Wanted something to do.
yeah. You invite me here, you buy me dinner,
Right.
and we'll share information. So
And you had a very brief stint with Havard Pest Control doing a similar role, a training role with them.
I did
And right, almost a year, correct?
10 months. Yeah,
And then you made the jump from Havard to here, Red Pest Solutions,
Yes.
correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Just making sure there wasn't another company somewhere in there that
no,
I wasn't aware of.
and I actually left Harvard to go back into retirement. That was my plan.
Right.
Until I ran into Gordon Red
Gordon Red.
at some of the association meetings because I wanted to keep my ties with even being retired. I wanted to keep my
Keep your credentials up too.
Sure.
So Gordon was kind of like Fred Strickland Sr. to me. And
I can see that.
He sat down one time and he said, we really need your help. You need to come work for us. I'm like, man, I just retired again.
For the second
This
time.
sounds so familiar.
But
Yeah.
he said, no, I really, you need to come work for us. He said, but I can't do it right now. He said, about like next year. And he was serious.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, we communicated for the next few months.
Really.
And then we finally interviewed like 5 times, like you guys did.
Right.
And I said, this is if I'm going to come back to work, this is the kind of company that I think I want to join. And I found out later, as you guys know, it's not a company, it's a family.
Right.
And I was so happy to learn that
Yeah.
because the environment I'd come out of, although I never complained about the environment in Orkin or termination, they paid me. I got paid, and I got paid good money sometimes.
Well, hold that. I want to come back to that. Hold that thought before we get too deep into that. You had 4 different companies you've worked for.
Yes.
And we already talked about all the people that you've mentored and influenced. And I'm one of them, by the way, Ken. You had a major impact on my career in this industry, and that's just the truth. At some point, and maybe you mentioned Fred. What was his last name? Fred Strickland. I lost it for a second. Were there other people over those years that were influential to you through those years? Anybody stand out besides Fred Strickland and Gordon Red? Anybody else?
Really, really, no. There were a lot of guys I respected, but those 2 have always stood out.
Okay.
Gordon and Fred. Even though I didn't work for Gordon
Right.
but just the respect I had for him when I would see him at the meetings and whatever. And a quick story about Gordon.
Sure.
The first Mississippi Pest Control Association meeting I went to, representing Termination, that first meeting. And you know how the meetings are. You got everybody going through and talking to the vendors and so on. And I'm like, I don't know anybody. I literally did not know anybody because I was the only Terminix person there. Guess who was the one person who came over to me and grabbed me by the arm and said, "Hey, you're Ken Davis, right?"
Really?
That was Gordon Red.
That sounds just like
It does.
That's pretty
It
cool.
does.
I'm serious. And this stuck with me my entire life. He said, "Come over here and sit at our table. Let's talk." And he brought me over to the table and we sat down and I started meeting Jimmy Lindley and all these different people. And it was on from then. But he was the one person
Wow.
that came and got me.
Just a quick little moment, but made a,
If he wouldn't have grabbed you, you might end up at somebody else's table.
I'm telling you. But those it's funny how those little moments will stay with you for life. 'Cause it's,
Well, as I was coming, I started, as you said, certainly the show isn't about me, but I'm going somewhere with this. I obviously started as a technician, was a service manager for a little while, eventually becoming a branch manager. And I've told you this before. I specifically remember sitting in meetings and listening to Ken Davis and just soaking up the things you were telling me. And I one thing that I've always tried to live by as a manager is you said, hey, if I go to your employees and ask them, what do they think of you?
Yeah.
You know, what I'd like
would
to
they
hear,
say?
people, if someone asks that about me, somebody's worked for me, I just want them to say, look, he was tough, but he was always fair with me.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to live that way or manage that way.
Yeah.
You know, you want to be, these are our policies.
Yeah.
We follow these rules, which is very important in the pest control industry, by the way.
Sure.
Very important.
But I'm always going to be fair with you. I'm always going to listen to you. And I got all that from you. And I never forgot that. So it's very similar to what you're
appreciate
talking
that.
about. Things like that stick with you. And
Yes.
I don't know if you remember telling us that or not, but
I do.
you did years
Because
ago, and it stuck with
I
me.
probably said it 1,000 times over
Well,
the years.
and Ken obviously made an impact because I haven't been in the industry for too long of a time. But even from the time that I started at Terminex, you find an article or a book with his name on it, or somebody says, "Well, Ken says this is how." I'm like, "Who's this Ken guy?"
Yeah.
You talked about him all the time. I'd never seen him, didn't know what he looked like. All I knew his name was Ken Davis, and he was a bad man in pest control. And lo and behold, I ended up working with him one day. But I just kept hearing the name over and over again. I'm like, I got to meet this guy eventually. And I think it was at an MPCA meeting. Actually, we were working together at the time. That was the first time I actually laid eyes on him. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's the guy.
I mean, one of the biggest reasons for me joining Red Pest Solutions was the chance to work with Ken again. You know, that was a big deal to me. You know, I'm glad that I got that opportunity, and of course, you had a big hand in convincing me to come here.
Somewhat, yeah.
And the reason is because what Ken says to me carries a lot of weight.
I appreciate that.
So, lots of new people that are still jumping in this industry.
Yeah.
Ken can't mentor them all.
No.
So here's your opportunity. Somebody new in this industry. Is there any particular piece of advice that you would give someone that's just starting out in pest control?
I would say just starting out in the industry,
Right.
give it at least a year before you decide if this is the right business for you or not. Don't make a short decision that might end your career.
Right.
Because there were many times in that first year that I went through that I said, "Oh, this is no, this is not good."
There are bad days.
Yeah,
There are.
and but you have to be committed. That's the big thing to me. You got to be committed.
Right.
If somebody's investing this in me, I need to make sure I've committed to give the return. So that's not much advice, but it's.
I knew you were going to say that too. I've been in enough interviews. It really is. That's the
does say
advice he
that,
gives.
yeah.
That's every.
Well, it is great advice.
It's great
'cause that
advice,
first
yeah.
year, you're going through training. You're learning. There's so much to learn in this industry, and it's almost impossible, even if you spend a full-time job's worth of time listening and observing and hands-on doing. You're still not going to see it all in a calendar year.
Yeah,
You're just not. But it gives you a good taste to fully understand if you're going to like it.
I think that I'll call it the classic statement that I use is the first 6 months is going to be the worst month of your career,
Yep.
and that's true.
It is
I've
true.
heard you
Usually
say
is,
that
so.
plenty of times. Yeah.
But once you get past that, then you can decide if this is the right business for you or not.
Well, I agree. That was definitely good advice. Now, I kind of cut you off a minute ago. I want to come back to this.
All right.
We've already talked about it. I mean, you worked 4 different companies over the years, and we talked about your path and how you ended up at Red Pest Solutions. But I mean, these are the twilight years of your career in the pest control industry, and you have chosen to spend them with Red Pest Solutions. Now, you kind of started on this thing. That's why I want to stop you, because I don't want to come back to it. But, how was your time here compared to some of your time at the other companies over the years?
Well, it's similar, obviously, because of the nature of the business. There's certain things going to be the same.
Sure.
Killing roaches are killing roaches, killing termites, killing termites.
I agree.
But there's a tremendous amount of respect for certain individuals at Terminex, because again they paid me and I worked. Same way with Orkin, so I have respect for Orkin. I can't say anything bad about either.
Oh, sure, of course.
Havard was just a short visit that didn't work out. But the main difference I mentioned earlier with Red is I don't know, it's an atmosphere. And it's an atmosphere that runs throughout each branch and every branch of the company. The first thing that caught my attention, because I did as Kolby did, first thing I did, I said, when I started, I told Eddie, I said, I want to ride with everybody we got. Mainly because I wanted to get to know them a little bit, but mainly I wanted to hear what they had to say.
Right.
Because, a new guy, they'll tell you anything.
You'll get the truth doing that.
But the odd thing, after about 5 or 6 ride-alongs, people complain, as they always do.
On various things, yeah.
I mean, if the sky's not bright enough, they'll complain.
Right.
But the one thing that I did not hear was a complaint about Red as a company. And that really caught my attention. And again, the longer I stayed here, the more I could see this is not a job. This is really, as I say, a family. Right. Because it is. And the respect that's shown from new employees to older employees, it's just a great atmosphere. You don't find that very often. Right. When you find it, you better, even on a bad day, you better hang on to it.
You better appreciate
it.
And
Ken said all these same things to me whenever I was contemplating the idea of coming on board at Red. And, as you are in interviews, you think things may be a little sugar-coated or a little too good to be true.
Right.
But, man, after the first couple weeks when I came on board, I was like, that daggum Ken, he was about spot on with something. Because Ken will, especially one-on-one, he's going to cut you straight. He's going to be honest, tell you, this is this is that. And it was exactly as he described it. And very, very thankful that I was able to come on and work here and work with Ken because it is such a great company, a great culture for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk. Do you have any closing thoughts with Ken here? Any other questions or thoughts?
I remember when Ken, you first came on at Red. Like I said, I hadn't done pest control until I was about 19. Learned part of the industry, but I had been a part of it, since I was a kid. And there are a lot of people that have been at Red, and people that I'm closer to than some family members, like Mike and and guys like you who have been there for some of those guys have been there a long time.
Sure.
Right.
There are some guys that have been there longer than I've been alive. There's some guys that have been there since my mom was a kid.
Right.
And it really is. It's when I see them come in. We have a technician, Mr. Charles. He comes in every now and then, and
gets his truck washed.
Yeah.
I saw that the other day.
Yeah.
And when you see him, it's not like, oh, well, here's that guy who used to work for us. It's he's. It's weird. It's just it really does. That's my family. Yeah. He's. And when Ken came on, I remember I think I was just graduating, and he had just gotten here. And he got me a graduation gift, and I was like, that's really nice.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Well, you have to. I just met you, man. You didn't have to do all that. It just shows Ken's character.
Yeah, it does.
Ken, he's caring. He's a good dude. And like you said, he shoots straight. Whenever I needed to be told something, he'd tell me. But I'll say, Ken he's been one of my favorite people, since I've been here. He's being able to learn from him, experience. It's just, you're a good dude, Ken.
Yep.
Good dude.
Tough but fair.
Tough
so
but
look,
fair. And extra stylish.
Extra stylish. So I tried to learn a little bit of that from him too. Yeah,
I'm glad you hit. We didn't even hit on that. Ken is always styling.
My shirt I had picked out matched better.
Yeah.
Well,
Ken wanted to wear a pink shirt today.
Well, Ken, like I said, I've known you for many, many years. You have always been Mr. Pest Control to me. I think Pest Control. I think Ken Davis, and even when we weren't working together, I still kept up with where you were, and you couldn't help but keep up with it because you run into people, and in general conversation, a lot of times Ken Davis comes up. Yeah. And so I even remember when Kolby was trying to make the decision on whether or not he was going to join Red, one of the things that come up was that you were still working here. And I said, man, Ken Davis is somebody you want to work with. You can learn a lot from Ken. So I still, by the way, Still learning stuff from you.
Always.
I do appreciate you, Ken. I appreciate everything you bring to Red Pest Solutions and this industry in general, and continue to do so.
Absolutely. I mean, I echo the same thing both these guys have said. You've been a cornerstone in this industry for a very long time and continue to be so. And you've been a blessing to Red and myself as a mentor. So I'm glad we're able to sit down with you today and talk and ask some questions. But, we're not going to reserve the right to ask questions just to us three. If you have any questions, we're going to post this interview on LinkedIn and possibly a few other places. Drop in the comments. Leave Ken a question. I'm sure we can get around to having him answer them and maybe reminisce on some other memories and stories and share any other stories you have throughout the years dealing with Ken Davis and some cool moments. So with that being said, this is our first Red interview series. And once again, very thankful to have Ken on to discuss things with us. Uncle Ken.
Uncle Ken.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for being on.
Appreciate you, Ken.
Thank you, bud.
Call the red man, call the red man. Red man, come and drive those pests away.